In architecture, often, I always found that my first scribble and my last finished part of the project would always look almost identical. But there would be a point where that first scribble I thought was absolute nonsense and it would get scrumpled up and thrown into the back of a drawer or something and be forgotten about for a long time. It would always be subconsciously there. But then you would go
Mm.
through a process of site analysis, investigation. You'd be looking up the history. You'd be looking up narratives, reading stories. And actually, your initial thoughts were right, but they need to be refined sometimes. And you'd actually find that you would come full circle, but it wasn't without that process that you truly understood why you had that first scribble, that first intention that was almost so innate. You would sort of scribble it without really thinking what you were doing. You just have a fat pen out and you just scribble a concept. And then, but you would have to go through, and I never understood it for a long time. I was always like, well, I already know what the answer is, but it was like, you don't know why you had the answer. And once you do have it, when you're stood in front of examiners or stood in front of clients and you're trying to pitch your idea and your concept, it's because of the stuff in the middle that means you can come back to that very simple truth, which was a bunch of lines on paper. You can come back to that. So, but if I was quizzed by the same people on the initial sketch, I would have fumbled my words and spoke, inconsistently about why I arrived at that point because I didn't know. And telling people I felt it isn't always the correct answer they need. And I think one of the reasons of the kind of with the social media situation is the fact that it's so easy to post that first sketch. When that first sketch is what you should post last in the process.
Yeah.
This is where it came from. This is my gut feeling. This is what created the first step forward in the direction I'm taking. But it wasn't the finished thing. And then presenting the finished thing, guiding people through the understanding, and then showing people its origin. Because to ignore your heart is also a bad move. Because we all know that when you don't respond to those gut feelings, right? Like, I knew that was going to go wrong. It's pointless saying afterwards. You have to act, but you have to act with a level of exploration and intention.
You spoke a little bit about your background in architecture, mate, and we're going to get a little bit to fitness later, but you are in the fitness space, and a lot of the fitness space promotion marketing is through social media. And I noticed when you went quiet on social media earlier in the year, and I'm sure other people did. Social media is a big tool in our industry. Used, abused, overused. We could share all of our different opinions on it. But what it serves us in an interesting way because it enables us to get things, ideas, concepts, and our voice to people that 10 years ago we wouldn't be able to do. It must be quite a big decision, and that voice impacts our business as well. It must have been quite an interesting decision to say, I'm going to step away from that. So do you want to talk us through bits of that process, mate, and how it started, how you felt about it, and maybe where it's taken you?
I was actually, it was a really simple moment. It was when Threads got released. I was already stepping back from it. I was already a little bit unsure about what I was putting out and why I was putting it out anymore. And I felt I'd been sucked into this kind of this world where I'd stopped posting what I liked and what I created and started thinking of creating to post, which really didn't inspire me because, I wouldn't like to think that like the famous artists of their time were creating these pieces of art because they were thinking, I'm going to get cool shots from this. They weren't thinking from that point of view. They were thinking about beauty in the world and what they were creating and how that would shift. And those pieces of art have can existentially shift people, can seismically change people's lives. And all of a sudden I found myself creating for Instagram. Like, I'm creating content. I was like, well, this isn't something I ever wanted to be. I wanted to create buildings or art or athletes. I never wanted to create content. I didn't want to be Canva expert or, or anything like that. I don't use Canva, but that kind of thing. And I thought, when does this stop? When does this race for me to create? You only have, as a creative, I think I'm a creative. You only have so many creative choices and so many creative things you can do in a day. And trying to create 3 a day or 1 a day or 7 a week, that doesn't leave a lot of fuel in the tank. Not if that's not your greatest passion. Some people's greatest passions are communicators, if you're an evangelist for whatever you do, then your job is to spread a message. That's cool. And if the visual component of that is part of it, that's great. Fill your team with evangelists and get that stuff out there. That's not me. When Threads came out on social media, I literally saw, in a space of like this overnight thing, I literally saw everyone jump on it. So if you're on it, I don't mean any insult, but I literally saw everyone jump on it. I realized that no one had probably read the terms and agreements. No one had ever really decided whether it was better. I don't really want to get into a war with whether Zuck or Musk is the better guy, but equally, I felt equally very played. And I thought, without any consequence, everyone jumped on and wanted to be the first person to jump on the bandwagon. And I don't think there's many moments in history where people jumping on the bandwagon was, I mean, especially in the terms of world atrocity, jumping on the bandwagon isn't always a good thing, especially when you're not thinking about the consequence. Now, some people might think there's no dire consequence to just writing something on a post and posting it on Twitter or Instagram or Threads, or whatever it's called. But I did feel at that moment that none of us stopped and went, hey, are we all on board with this? Or are we just going to eat it up? And I got lambasted with loads of people posting threads that day. And I just thought to myself, wow, we're really just hungry to be part of this thing without any consequence. And at that moment, I just went, I do not want this to be the main source of my thought process through the day. How does this appear to other people? And what affirmation do I get for this? Because the public affirmation means that eventually, the moment you turn around and say, let's do more of this, it got more likes, and you stop asking the question is, should we post this? Should I present this? Is the moment you answer to other people. And the moment you answer to other people, whether you think the client is always right or the spectator is always right, you have to realize that you have just taken away your own free will in every way, shape, and form. And I felt that, being who I am, you would, I am a natural person to want to be liked. I'm people pleaser a little bit, although it tends not to come out like that in the end. But I didn't think I would just stop. I think I could have that intention, but I'd always put one extra hand in the crisp packet. And I thought, you know what, I'm actually just going to step away from this and think about what it is I want to share in the fitness industry. And I decided at the start of the year, I would give myself a quantity of time anyway. And through the year, this was one of the extra pieces. I thought, it's not away forever. It's not something I'll never not use again. And on my businesses, I do post the odd post. But it was something that I was like, it's going to be a byproduct of something happening rather than an intention of making it for that thing. And it will be back in my life, but when it comes back in my life, it will be very deliberate.